Hello, everyone. I hope you had a great Christmas and have had or are having a fantastic winter break and are really looking forward to 2016. Well, today I'm actually going to be talking about things that I would hopefully be doing in 2016. So this is a talk that I delivered at BINUS University in Jakarta, Indonesia, and the Department of Psychology's faculty had invited me over to talk about the work that I'm doing in IIT Hyderabad. So BINUS is quite similar to IIT in that they've got a very strong focus on engineering and design, and they have departments quite similar to the humanities and social sciences departments in IIT. They have departments and schools in social sciences and humanities. So while it had started off perhaps as an auxiliary department or schools, now they're major departments and schools in their own right, very similar to HSS departments in IITs. Now, so they had asked me to come over to talk about how I interface and collaborate with medics and engineers, being a psychologist myself. So I went over there to talk about how I woke up to the other side. So without much delay, let's start talking. Now, people who subscribed or have been following my YouTube channel already know who I am, but just in case you're new here or seem to have forgotten, I'm Mahati, and I've got a master's and a PhD from the UK in health psychology, and I've specialized in psycho-oncology. I'm an assistant professor in psychology from the Department of Liberal Arts, and I'm also an adjunct professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering in IIT Hyderabad. In terms of my research interests, I do a lot of work in cultural contexts of care, social and health psychology, and also in the interface or intersection between medical engineering and psychology. So whenever I meet people, they always ask me, "Oh, so how do you make it work? With medicine, engineering, and psychology, because they appear like fairly disparate disciplines." So I engage in the domains of research and teaching largely, right? So in terms of research, how I go about it is by interfacing and collaborating with engineers and medical doctors, patients, caregivers, and also the general public. And what I do is I would conduct, say, needs assessments, experiences of care, to kind of give feedback to medics or to engineers about any kind of product that they might be thinking about, or any kind of research idea that they're rolling out and they want to pilot it, or they want to check on the feasibility. These kind of things are where I sort of kick in. In terms of the teaching, I take a bunch of courses for BTechs and postgrads on a variety of topics on social health and medical psychology. But a major aspect of my teaching is to look at clinical immersion, and thus leading to hopefully innovative problem solving. So where students actually get to go and immerse themselves into a medical environment to sort of come up with innovative solutions to any kind of existing issues. But I also serve on doctoral committees for MPhil, PhD, and MTech dissertations. And I also have some consultancy work that I do. And there, what I do is I interface with entrepreneurs and corporate health professionals, and I provide them feedback on existing models of care. But I also explain to them about what potential they have in terms of improving the services that they're already providing. So I do this either as a consultant, where I go there and I spend a day or two or how many ever days, and share my observations. But I also can conduct studies with them. So we kind of like do collaborative research projects where either I hire somebody or I go myself, and I develop the study and I give them this thick data information. So I'm going to go on to give an example in terms of research and an example in terms of the teaching that I do. And then I'll be talking about a study that has already been put up in our YouTube channel. So I'll be glossing over it very quickly. And then I'll tell you guys about what we have planned for 2016. So in terms of research, a fantastic example is the work that I'm doing with Dr. Anand Mohan in the Department of Chemical Engineering at IIT Hyderabad. And Anand does research on cost-effective technology to detect and diagnose atherosclerosis. So he's done a whole bunch of simulations through a funded grant, and they've come up with fairly accurate results now. And now the team, after a couple of years, is now ready to test the efficacy and the feasibility in the medical setting, so in the real environment. So this is where the psychology really comes in, right? So first we make the connection between patients, cardiologists, and Anand. Then what I do is I would be interviewing patients on a bunch of topics that ranges from attitude towards healthcare, their medical literacy, medical decision making, what's their attitude towards new technology, what's the decision making, pathways, and what's spending behavior and the doctor-patient communication. So basically what I do is, and how I support what Anand is doing, is through end of the day he's gonna hopefully develop a product, right? So he's running all these simulations. Why? Because he wants to test it in the real world. And then what happens is that the patient or the hospital needs to take up that patented I'm saying patented in quotes or brackets. It's really up to Anand what he does with it, but it's up to them whether they want to buy into that product, right? So what I do is I look into predicting what are the things, or rather what are the variables that might predict their willingness, let's say, to take up or partake in this new technology. Okay. And the same thing for cardiologists. I would also look into, interviewing them in terms of about topics on like attitude towards new technology again, and their relationship with the patient, how do they make decisions for treatment, things like that. So that I understand the cardiologist and patient dynamic and how they communicate with each other, so that we could look into, how they would have convinced or offered this new method in detecting atherosclerosis now, right? And also to look into how, because we have a fairly paternalistic model where the physician still is a major decision maker on behalf of the patient. So we want to look into what are the decision making pathways that the physician experiences, and also what the patient and their caregivers would experience. Now, how does this help? First, it allows to establish the most important basic connection between the stakeholders of this technology. That is, between Anand, myself, the medics, and their patients. Then it also helps in terms of building a participant base that is very trusting of our team, because I'd have spent time with these patients and physicians. I'd have become a familiar face around over there, and it's so much more, easy to buy into something when you can put a face on it, right? So I help in developing that trust. And then provide insights into acceptability of that current technology and opportunities to enhance its uptake. So exactly all the things that I've been talking about just earlier. So then the question is, how did Anand and I even get to this point where now we're able to collaborate with each other? First, it started simple. I started talking to faculty, I started telling them about what I do, and through this process what happened was I could identify colleagues whose interests were mutual and complementary and compatible. So these are the three most important things that I was looking for, because end of the day you want to have a very complementing and a good professional relationship with the colleague that you're going to be working with. And then what I did was I invited Anand to the doctoral committee of my senior PhD student Shubha Gomati. who is doing work in diabetes self-management. So that gives Anand an opportunity to understand the language that we speak as psychologists. What is it that we do? So he gets a bird's eye view about the process and how psychology research really goes about, how we go about research. And then I've also invited Anand to deliver talks about the work that he's doing in one of my classes, and to also attend one of my classes. So that again allows for Anand to understand the work that I do, but also for me to understand what's the work that Anand does. So he talked all about atherosclerosis and the work that they were going to be doing a couple of years ago itself. So at that time they hadn't run the simulations yet. And then what happened later was Anand invited me to the doctoral committee of his MTech student who was working on these simulations. So I would get a better idea or a better picture of what's happening with these simulations. So I get more well versed with it. And in terms of research, I shared some of the articles that I've written, and we talked about how it would benefit each other's work. And also, we are now in the process of writing an article with a cardiologist on the methodology of these simulations, where my role would be in providing the recommendation for future research, which involves psychosocial care. Now, in terms of teaching, now that's research I was talking about, and in terms of teaching now, I can talk about one of the courses I run on clinical healthcare. So I'm an adjunct faculty in the Department of Biomedical Engineering, which is headed by Renu John, whose picture you can see on your screen right now. I teach a 1-credit course. It was a 2-credit course in one academic year before, but now it's come down to a 1-credit course on clinical healthcare during the August to December semester. And what I do over here is I have the students attend a couple classes just to give them an idea about what psychosocial care is and human factors, bioethics, those kind of things, biosafety. And after that, so basically prime the students for their, for their clinical immersion. And then the students visit 2 to 3 hospitals to observe diagnostic and treatment procedures. So they get like a really, in-depth experience. Well, not really in-depth, but a fairly good experience of what the medical environment is like. And after that, the students are expected to write a report on their observations, and with a very special focus on, one, the psychological factors of the care, but also what are the issues that they observed were faced by the stakeholders in that hospital. So it could be healthcare staff, caregivers, whoever. And also then recommendations for any kind of innovative solutions to kind of address these issues. Now, how does this help? It sensitizes the next generation of biomedical engineers towards engineering, psychology, and psychosocial care. But also, it develops a dialogue between the 3 disciplines of biomedical engineering, medicine, and psychology. So they get to get a taste of, what may be seemingly disparate disciplines, but are actually very interrelated. So they can make that connection. But also it allows for them to think out of the box and come up with innovative solutions that are more real-world applicable. So I talked about how I contribute to engineering-related topics and teaching. Now, how does engineering help me and my research, right? So, it's a two-way street after all. So now I'm going to give you an example of a study that was conducted that looked at patients' beliefs and experiences of cancer in India. This was a collaborative study that was done with when I was a PhD student, actually. I was a graduating PhD student, rather. And it was done with Dr. Senthil Rajappa in Indo-American Cancer Hospital in Hyderabad, and also Rebecca Beacon from London. So I'm going to gloss over or go really quickly through these slides, mainly because Venkatesh Boddu has put up his talk on my YouTube channel. So if you want a more elaborate understanding of the study, then you can always click on that video. So, brief background, beliefs and attitude towards cancer are very closely related to a whole bunch of psychological and physical outcomes. Now, the research in India, there's been very little work that has looked at cancer beliefs, even in a very broad manner. So there's one of our study that's been, a two-part paper that looks into unawareness and the levels of distress. So how do illness perceptions or illness beliefs relate to these topics? And then there's another study that was conducted by Greenfield and Coley that looked at breast cancer beliefs and help-seeking intentions. Now, the thing about cancer beliefs is that they're very, very nuanced topics, like cancer beliefs or experiences, attitudes, health seeking. These are extremely nuanced but very intertwined and very personal experiences. And there's been very little qualitative work that really looked into it, in spite of it being such a pivotal, important, area of care. And there's been only one study that looked at it, which was the Party study that was recently published, that looked at patient navigation for treatment seeking. So it was looking at patient behaviors. So, owing to the fact that there was very limited work that was done in a qualitative manner, and that looked at cancer beliefs and health-seeking experiences and intentions, and adjustment and attitude towards cancer among patients in India. So that's what we wanted to look at. In terms of the methods, we interviewed 11 patients, and we had a nice group that represented the different times since diagnosis. In our interviews were semi-structured, and they were conducted in private patients, and our topics are listed here below. Help-seeking experiences, reactions to cancer diagnosis, their beliefs, experiences of cancer, and coping with the illness. The average length of our interview was 44 minutes, and we used IPA to analyze the data. So here are our patient details, and you can see again it's a very nice distribution in terms of most of the demographic variables. We had 6 major themes that emerged from this study, and I'll be talking about these in turn really, really quickly. The first thing that really struck us was that patients said that there was an enormous delay in seeking diagnosis, mainly due to fear and lack of awareness, and then it led to subsequent regret. The reactions to the cancer diagnosis were disbelief, fear, confusion, anger, and again, regret came out pretty strong. And when we asked about how they conceptualized cancer, right, so illness beliefs, they understood it mainly through very elaborate disease descriptions, which were very culturally motivated, and through the symptoms that they were really experiencing then and there. And they had extremely conflicting causal explanations. So there was a part of them that attributed, say, for example, to karma, but also they couldn't quite understand why it was happening to them, and sometimes also they could come up with environmental causal explanations. But in terms of emotions, something that really struck us was that patients felt extreme amount of worry. They felt a lot of responsibility towards their family, in terms of the role of treatment and its side effects. They felt like they had a lot of unfinished business, and one needs to bear in mind the fact that in India, your responsibility towards your family is crucial. So, in terms of how patients were coping with their illness, it was very heartening to see the fact that they were actually using a variety of coping techniques. They use positive reinterpretation right through to acceptance, social support, seeking information. They had accessibility to a variety of coping strategies that they were using interchangeably. So these are all quotes, and as I said, you can always go through to Venkatesh's talk. So our last theme was about attitude towards cancer, and again, it was really nice to see, or heartening to see, the fact that in spite of the extreme worries that they experienced, and that the strong feeling of regret, a lot of the patients actually did believe that they should maintain a happy spirit and a fighting spirit towards their illness, and they felt like their perceptions of mortality were really dispelled, which is the reason why we have the title of the paper. They thought it was going to be the end, but it really wasn't the end of their life. So in conclusion, some of the findings that really struck us was that the delay in seeking diagnosis was mainly because of fear and lack of awareness, but that led to a lot of strong feelings of regret, and that patients were able to describe their illness still through their own experiences, suggesting that they didn't have access to information. And although patients in the study did report having very negative reactions to their diagnosis and had worries, they also showed that they were using a range of coping and had maintained a positive attitude towards the cancer. So that also suggests that in spite of having negative perceptions of cancer, patients were able to reframe the disease in a more positive light. Now, what does this all mean in terms of the collaboration that we are exploring in IIT Hyderabad? So now there's one thing that really struck us, and we thought that here's a really good opportunity to do some collaborative work. When I started talking to my colleagues, they said that they found this whole delay in seeking diagnosis to be extremely crucial, because India is faced with a burden of patients coming with what would have been a curable cancer, but coming at a very incurable stage. So it's an important issue that needs to be addressed soon. So, and from a psychology point of view, patients obviously were coming with very strong feelings of regret, right? So they would have needed more psychological support, which right now, again, given our unfortunate statistics, is not available to every patient. So we really wanted to focus on the delay in seeking diagnosis, and we're looking at helping potentially overcome these issues through using IVRS system that provides an easily available patient navigation information. So if the patient wants to know where is the closest PHC, this navigation system that is both voice led and textual will be able to point you towards which direction you need to go, alongside giving you additional information about the symptoms, relating the symptoms to the disease, basically. And unfortunately, I can't disclose any more information about this study because it's all in the pipeline, but I can tell you that the people that who are involved in the study are Bhimarjuna Reddy, who's the HOD of the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, along with KSRM and Abhinav, who are in the electrical engineering departments. So this kind of gives you an idea about how a study that is psychology driven was benefited from the collaboration that is coming in from the engineering departments. So it's nice because we have this nice two-way street, right? I'm able to contribute to their departments, and they're able to contribute to the psychology work. So we're sort of like feeding off each other's exciting and interesting and important, socially important findings, really. So, like I was saying, there are enormous advantages to bridging medicine, engineering, and psychology. So, the most important one is being part of the innovative or innovation process, because unless we start a dialogue and start communicating across our domains, we won't be able to explore new horizons. And it's only then that you sort of start thinking out of the box innovatively about issues. And also making medical solutions more holistic, through these unique, insightful, and meaningful collaborations. I could, have just sat on those findings, right? And I could have just simply published them and that's it. But then, you want to make it more holistic, right? So then you start talking to other, colleagues, and then something wonderful can come out of it, which is very meaningful. And then it's also really exciting to cross disciplinary frontiers, I find it really exciting to wake up in the morning and say, hey, you know what? I have this really cool study that I want to work on because it means I can talk engineering, I can talk computers, I can talk about voice navigation. I get to learn completely new things, and I'm doing it all for something that's very socially relevant, So it's lovely to wake up to the other side, basically. So thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, comments, feedback, just please go ahead and contact me in the below email ID. And hope you have a fantastic 2016. And as you can see, I'm certainly waiting for it to happen.